Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Chong, Deputy Mayor of Clarence, and I'd like to welcome you all to this special planning meeting of the City of Clarence. It's lovely to see so many people in the chambers again. It's been a long time since we had a full gallery. I will say that masks are not mandatory, but if you would like to have one, we do have some at the front if anybody would like one. Could I please ask those in the chamber to stand for the acknowledgement and the council prayer? For I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay respect to elders past and present. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the City of Clarence. Amen. Thank you. Can I advise members in the council and members of the public that council meetings are live streamed, audio-visually recorded and published to the council's website. This meeting is not protected by privilege. If you don't have one, a link to the agenda is available via the council's website. We have one apology tonight, Mayor Alderman Doug Chipman, and we also have Alderman Von Berto, who is joining us by Zoom. Are there any declarations of interests of Aldermen or close associates? Okay, thank you very much. We have 4 deputations tonight. Can we, just before we start the deputation, say you'll have 3 minutes to talk, and there will be a warning sound at the end of the 3 minutes. Then, if you're happy with that, Aldermen can ask questions, which you're free to answer, or if you prefer not to answer questions, that's also fine. General Manager, would you like to call the first deputation?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The first deputation is from the proponents, Demetrius Gouzoulis and Adam Sebastianos. Thank you.
Very much. Can everyone hear me okay? Deputy Mayor Heather Chong, Clarence City Councillors, Alderman, I should say, General Manager Ian Nelson, and Clarence City Planners, in particular Bruce Gibbs and Indra Boss, and also to the members of the community. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here this evening, and regardless of the outcome, thank you also for your open and balanced correspondence leading up to this meeting. By now, I hope for those that we have met, you've got a true sense of who we are as people and the long-term vision that we have for the future. I grew up in Midway Point. I went to school at St John's in Richmond. Pat Maguire, I should say. I should introduce him as well. One of our co-founders, a very, very proud Tasmanian, and also the man behind the world's best whiskey. And Adam Sebastiano here representing his family, a proud family of successful business leaders with a wonderful track record and also a long-term vision for Tasmania and a real passion for Tasmania as well. As a resident of Howrah with 3 kids at Corpus Christi and Bellerive, I hope that one day, not too far from now, we have another world-class experience 20 minutes from Hobart for our friends, family and all of our community to enjoy. Beyond this, we will create a sustainable business, I think first and foremost, which intensifies farming on prime agricultural land from almost nothing to 88% of the arable land. In addition, we will create significant value add for a crop that was historically grown in the area and to the value of $540,000 of additional barley requirements for local farmers. This is a significant agri-tourism opportunity which highlights our unique coastal barley to bottle origins. We will create additional career paths for 40 to 50 people. From a local government perspective, the project has strong linkage to the Clarence City Council Strategic Plan 2021 to 2031. Most notably towards Strategic Goal Area 3, a prosperous and creative city. And from a state government perspective, the project is aligned with Tasmania's T21 Visitor Economy Action Plan to increase regional dispersal and enhance the Tasmanian visitor experience and to support innovation and quality in all that we do. We acknowledge that the significant number of conditions in the recommendation, we acknowledge the significant number of conditions in the recommendation, and we will work closely with Clarence City Council to ensure that we meet all of these conditions. Once again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, and we look forward to working with you to bring this project to life. Thank you. and certainly open to answer any questions, as are Patrick and Adam, if need be.
Alderman James?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the invitation to go up and visit the site some
pleasure.
days ago. It appears to be a very large building, and particularly when viewed from Richmond Road, and I'm sure you've seen these documents because they've been submitted. Was there any consideration given to move the buildings further east and perhaps provide some streetscape to block that sort of view from Richmond Road?
Sure. Look, absolutely there was consideration given, but in terms of the streetscape, the building's been architecturally designed with a renowned and award-winning architectural firm, Cumulus, to really blend in and be a synergy with the local landscape. I, hand on heart, believe once it's built, everyone will look on it as a source of pride in the area.
And second question, please. The distillery has the capacity to produce more than 2,000 litres a day, and it has the capacity to run 24/7 days a week. Annual production is anticipated at 822 litres per day. Would associated noise and odours increase substantially when production will exceed 822 litres per day?
I think clearly, a clear answer from us is no, it won't. I mean, distilleries, they tend to make very little noise, and they tend to emit very, very little odour as well. Unless the smell of Maltese Milo kind of wheat bix, warm wheat bix with honey in the morning is offensive, that'll be the absolute extent of what you might get from close proximity to the distillery. It's not something that'll permeate and go through the valley.
No further from me, thanks.
Alderman Mulder?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I just have two questions. Would you like to explain explain to us the extent to which you'll be using local produce, both on site and from the Coal Valley, as opposed to importing raw materials from elsewhere?
Absolutely. So our intent is to highlight the local produce, whether that's from a hospitality perspective. If it could be 100%, that's certainly what we'll do. I mean, there's no shortage of wonderful, high-quality ingredients within a stone's throw of where we're building the distillery, first and foremost. And then as far as barley is concerned, we'll look to grow as much as we possibly can on site. And we're working with farmers from the area, some represented here this evening, to grow the rest of our barley requirements from the area.
And my second question relates to our what I think is one of the world's best reuse water cycle schemes, and to what extent will your production on site use recycled water from our scheme?
From a barley growing perspective, it'll be completely essential. So I think it's around about 27,000 hectolitres. Don't quote me on that. If you're looking for a number, I can come back to you. But, 27 hectolitres, apologies. But what the allocation is really, really important to us, and long-term water access, whether it's reuse or through the new southeastern irrigation scheme, is critical to the success of this project.
Thank you, Madam.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Gilzelis.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Second deputation tonight is Mr. Stephen Hindley.
Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'll be quite brief. I'm not here to speak against the project. I think it could enhance the area a great deal. But there's no getting away from the fact that the scale of this project is not in keeping with the scale and the visibility, should I say. It's positioned deeper into the valley and further out to the centre, makes it much more visible from the road, from the hill, from the aspect for the people who live in the region, and I'm one of them. So what I'd like to see is some consideration given to splitting the sites. There is an industrial park just at the other end of Richmond Road, which already has a distillery working there and which has a wine production facility. So the storage sheds, I think, if they were removed and the overall scale of the project was reduced, that would be much more in keeping and enhancing to the general valley, which is, after all, on the wine tour destination now. It's a significant, not just a beautiful place to live, but a place to be proud of. I don't think wheat bits with honey is offensive. To be honest, anything other than air is going to be an issue for people that live there. That's why we live in Tasmania. So I'm not speaking against this at all. I'd like to see it. I mean, I'd love to see barley growing there. I'd love to see a nice cellar door, and I don't mind looking at a distillery. But if you can afford to pay $156 for a bottle of scotch, you can afford to pay $157 and store it down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions? If there are any.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Our third speaker tonight is Mr. Peter Mcintosh.
Thanks for the opportunity to address the meeting. I'd like to preface, I'm Peter Mcintosh, I live in Belcourt. I'd like to preface my comments with the fact that I'm a member of Richmond Fire Brigade. A lot of people might know that we're also first responders to motor vehicle accidents and road crash rescues as well as fires. On the last 6 weeks, we're averaging one motor vehicle accident / road crash rescue a week, with an additional 900 vehicle movements a day from this project, most of whom will most likely be visiting the tasting facilities. I've got some concern that average is going to increase somewhat. That remains to be seen, but nonetheless, it's a possible issue. I feel the proposed development is a massive industrial factory in a paddock, somewhat masquerading as an agricultural value-add project, and I don't believe that it's in keeping with a rural valley consisting of small family farms, residents, and small-scale tourist venues. The major factory component is sited quite near Richmond Road, not set back further into the property, unlike many similar projects. And we've got a lot of them in Tasmania. Most of the large wineries in Tasmania have facilities of similar scales, but they're usually set well back into the site, and quite often the only way you know that facility is there is often just a small sign near their entrance. It's buried in vineyards or further back. It's not right on the road, which this, by the nature of the site, it appears that's the way it's going to be. And I don't believe any amount of landscaping will in time soften the impact of a building of that scale right on Richmond Road. That a tree is going to take sort of 30 years to get high enough to mask that. But and no amount of landscaping will obscure a 95 space car park.
Thank you, Mr. Mcintosh.
Adjacent to Richmond Road.
Thank you very much. Sorry, that was your 3-minute signal.
Okay.
Are you happy to take questions if there are any questions?
I'll take questions, yeah. May I make one further small point? I'm not against, really quick, I'm certainly not against
take it as an answer to a question. Ask the question.
I will ask a number of questions. One, are you opposed to this development in principle?
So
Sorry, my hearing.
Are you opposed to this development in principle?
Yes, I'm not opposed to the project. I'm opposed to the scale of it. I totally agree with value-adding agricultural enterprises. I had a vineyard and a cellar door myself before I retired, so that's what I did. So I don't disagree with the concept. It's merely the scale that I have a concern with.
You had a second question.
Yeah. Well, my first, Mr. My question relates to, you're saying once a week we're getting the
On average, look, we've had...
Sorry, let me finish.
And it's the area, not Richmond Road specifically, but it's the area.
Yeah, so you're getting, on average, once a week a call out to a crash
Correct.
rescue. My question is that is an alarming issue. First of all, does that data appear? Will that data appear in the road crash records that the state government holds?
It must, and it's the area that we respond to or assist other brigades with. And for example, there were 3 on Brinktop in the space of several days a little while ago. Then we might go a couple of weeks with none whatsoever. But on average, over a 6-week period, we've actually had 6. Some of those quite minor, but nonetheless they've been motor vehicle accidents.
Mr. Mcintosh, can I ask then, how would you see the road network at this particular junction? Could it be addressed to resolve those sorts of issues?
I don't think it's so much the specific road junction that will cause an issue. Rather, it's the traffic on that road consists of a curious and unfortunate mix. There's large trucks moving greater distances using it as a corridor. There's local residents and farmers. There's, during peak hour, there's residents from much further afield and local tradies. At 3 o'clock and sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock, there's mums running kids to school. And then throughout the day, there's quite a number of tourists, including overseas tourists who we've all watched make simple errors, including which side of the road they're driving on, mixing in with that fairly complex mix of traffic in a what is really a small rural environment, and it's not so much the I don't see the design or layout of the road infrastructure being the cause of problems. Rather, it's simply driver attitude and driver experience, and we're looking to increase that mix somewhat. That's the concern.
Thank you, Mr. Mcintosh.
Okay. Any other questions? Alderman James.
Thank you. Mr. Mcintosh, you mentioned in your correspondence that it's the main tourist access route and it's heritage listed on the Richmond Heritage and Assessment of the Valley. Are you aware that the actual zoning in this particular area is rural living zone B?
Yes, sorry.
Rural living zone B?
No, I'm not aware of the specific zone. I'm a resident there, I'm not aware of the specific zoning. No.
Okay, because this particular development does encroach in some part into that particular zoning. Given the size and scale of this, is there any component of that which you would think would be more appropriately placed or relocated to an industrial site, or namely in Cambridge Park?
Yes, I did. I talked for too long and didn't get to that point, but I felt that I was going to ask if the issue of scale could be addressed by some of the larger component of the project be moved to the Cambridge Industrial Park, just as Poolies have their winery down there. Quite a lot of the vineyards within the area actually use the contract winemaking facilities of the old winemaking TAS facility, all in that area. And they still retain their cellar door and visitor experience and keep it as on a fairly personal level and somewhat boutique level. This goes against that. So the scale issue, again, is the one that concerns me. And again, it's the nature of the site, I understand that, but if it's possible from a design point of view for some of those larger components, if they can't be moved to Cambridge, can some of those larger components be moved to the rear part of the site, which would address some of the, it's not going to alter the traffic and things like that, but it may address the impact of the scale for people who are travelling to go to Richmond and looking for, I think, a small, personable experience, not a major factory-like experience.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, just not a question, but something that I'm not sure is accurate in terms of
And sorry. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mcintosh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Our final deputation tonight is Miss Amy Griffiths.
Hi, my name's Amy Griffiths. Thank you for encouraging me to speak tonight, and thank you to all of those aldermen that visited the site the other day, and thank you for the opportunity to answer any questions you might have. So my name's Amy, and my family owns the property right next door to the proposed development, and I lease the facilities to run a business known as the Coal Valley Equestrian Centre. Let me start off by saying that we are not opposed to the development in principle. We do acknowledge all of the opportunities that it brings to the area with the investment and the income opportunities for primary producers. However, we're also in that position where the desired large-scale development is right close to our boundary and close to the residents on our land. Since our submission, we have worked towards remediating some solutions with the proponents, and that would assist with our approval of the project. However, we did want to outline what some of those effects are and why our support hinges on those amendments being carried through. So a little bit about our property. We're quite irregular shaped. We've got very narrow land, very small opportunities to actually use our irrigation rights. Where the development is situated, it is right next to one of the paddocks that we reserve for cropping. We do graze horses through there as well. We do aim to irrigate that with the Tas water, and one of our concerns was that would some of that irrigation drift be a problem with having a public car park right next door, and also the access with the public being so close by to our stock and the inherent risk that would bring to not only our animals but also the public in general. So we have worked towards what we think is a solution to increase a buffer zone there. And we're hopeful that would alleviate some of our concerns. Some of the other concerns that we did have was drainage onto our land. I think when we initially looked at it, there was some stormwater kind of runoff, and it wasn't really clear where it was going, and we had concerns about the impact on another rear parcel of our land that is prone to flooding and the impact on that on our cropping. With the amendments, that is redirected towards the creek. and that is a key factor for our approval, because we don't want to have another parcel of our land precluded from actual agricultural use. Due to our size and shape, we have developed our land, but we've also tried to confine it to a small parcel. That parcel of land was
Thank you.
kind
If
of
you could just wind up the sentence.
Okay. It was sectioned off because we can't irrigate it, but it is right on the boundary, very close to where the trucks and loading bay would be. So,
Thank you. Are there any questions? Alderman Warren.
Thank you for that, Amy. Can I ask you, that parcel of land that you're just talking about, that's close to the road, have your concerns regarding that been mitigated in any way? Because I understand you're concerned about heavy trucks coming past where the horses are tethered to the fence.
It does alleviate some concerns. I mean, ideally, it would suit us to have the land remained as grazing and farming land. However, we understand that that's probably unlikely to happen, but so we would support the proposed development as long as the amendments with the change of driveways and also kind of some ongoing traffic management through there. It's, not 100% desirable, but we just wanted to outline that we had concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions? Alderman James.
Thanks for the invitation on the property over the weekend. My question is in relation to the agricultural pursuits that you undertake on the property. Could you just provide us with some information in relation to the amount of cropping that you undertake?
Yep, I calculated that last night. Last year we cropped 16 acres of our land, so we have set aside the development part is tried to contain onto about 5 acres, which we couldn't reasonably irrigate because of buffer zones near residences. So the big parcels that we can crop on the land are the roadside 6 acres and then some 8 acres down the bottom. We can crop extra land if conditions are in good conditions. So, but we do reserve those every year, and we do fertilise and irrigate as we can for that prime purpose of cropping.
And just some detail of the cropping, is it?
It's hay.
Hay for
so
basically on farm use and not export, or?
We also sell off-site, so we've got a cocksfoot hay in there, which some horse owners that's what they prefer, and we sell that to the local horse community. Yep.
Thanks.
Alderman Mulder.
Thank you, Madam Acting. Thank you, Ms Griffiths, for your presentation. I would just like to ask that, given your concerns, and to what extent do you get a lot of comfort? Do you get any comfort from the conditions, from the large range of conditions that have been imposed upon this site, that many of your concerns may be addressed?
All of our concerns are not addressed, but I don't think that is possible with, the degree of the development and the size and scale of the development. However, we do feel that this is probably a best case scenario if the development proceeds in the size and scale that it's hoped that from the applicants.
We all live in hope. The next question I have is, given you've had some discussions which sound to be reasonably positive with the developers, what confidence do you have that some of the outstanding conditions may be actually met and addressed and at least partly ameliorated?
I think so far they've been, they've listened to us and they've gone away and done something about it. Of course, nothing is actually on paper and done yet, so I can't answer you that. I can only go on face value.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Amy. I'm sorry I couldn't get to your place. I got
all right.
a gentleman up 8:30 in the morning because I was working when you went to me. Now, I love horses, so I took a lot of notice of the horses in your area. But hopefully, by going in, you'll see it tonight.
Madam Mayor, I can't hear.
Sorry, Alderman Pearce,
sorry.
can you talk to your microphone?
All right. Now, where was I?
You like
Yes, I love
horses?
horses. What I was more worried about is your drainage issue because, you know, you've worked together and you seem to be fairly happy, but it's the drainage that's got you worried. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when State Growth changed the road up in the past year, so they slightly changed the drainage of the road, which then drained into the dam, which never held water, and then went along the new right-of-way and then over out into our property. We've drained that down our driveway into our dam, but that then has on-flow down over into Lou's property as well, which affects his crops. And then we also have some drainage that comes from ours, which we keep on the property, goes into a dam, then comes down into our paddock, which, of course, it's a low-lying area and it doesn't flow away very much. So we were concerned that we would get more water directed down that section, which in times of 100+ mil rain, like we had the other week, that then completely floods our paddock out, and we had concerns about having tractors on that, being able to get machinery on it to spray, to seed, to fertilise, and then to cut hay. That was our concern.
So this is from this property here. Is that what you're saying?
It was the change from State Growth on the road.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not really...
No, but if, like, as our concern was that with the initial plans, there was a swale drain that just went down the driveway to the northern site, which, if in events of large rain, like we had the other month, would complete... We've been there for the last couple of years doing civil works, so we know that when a lot of water comes, a lot of water comes.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I also, just before we move on, acknowledge a written deputation from Peter McKay in support of the project, which everyone has a copy of. Okay, let's move on to consideration of the development application for 819 Richmond Road, Cambridge. Alderman Blomley.
Madam Acting Mayor, I move the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Blomley.
Madam Acting Mayor, I'm delighted to move the officer's recommendation to approve the $30 million distillery and cellar development at 819 Richmond Road, Cambridge, the Maguire and Co distillery proposal. And up front, I would like to congratulate the proponents on the professional way they have engaged with stakeholders, including those who initially raised objections, so that our planning staff have been able to deliver this comprehensive recommendation that contains extensive conditions and advice. Madam Acting Mayor, as the matter before us is a planning item, we are of course constrained to discussing only planning-specific matters and are restricted on what we can highlight in regards to the many positive economic and social benefits this significant investment will bring to our city. I know that the Executive Chairman of Fair Isle Holdings, the owner of the neighbouring property that had made representations, has, following engagement with the proponents and our planning staff in an email dated the 26th of May, expressed his support for the development. Importantly, in my discussions with him, he made it abundantly clear that he did not and had never opposed the development. However, he did have concerns, as we've heard tonight, legitimate concerns in my view, regarding the safety of both clients and horses, as well as stormwater control. Quite rightly, he availed himself of the opportunity to participate in the process, and pleasingly, the officer's recommendation addresses both these matters, and in the final wash-up, this engagement has delivered and improved arrangement for all involved. Madam Acting Mayor, a number of issues were raised during the public consultation stage, and I would like to directly address a number of these. Firstly, the issue of the scale of this development. It is important to note that the scale of this $30 million investment meets all the setback and height requirements, and in terms of the development standards, it ought to be supported. Secondly, it has been claimed that this is an inappropriate development for the agricultural area. On this, let's be very clear. This business is all about value adding. That is, in order to produce their product, the proponents need barley. Barley will be grown on this property, and that's the value add, and part of the paddock to glass approach that we heard about earlier this evening. Now, whilst this property alone will not be able to provide the quantity provided, with the intention being to source this crucial ingredient locally from the Coal River Valley, clearly there's an opportunity for neighbouring properties to meet that demand, and as such, this is the ideal development for the area. Thirdly, the claim that this will fetter agricultural pursuits around the development. It is pleasing that the proponent has engaged with the neighbours to mitigate against the scaring of horses and visitors, and that appropriate changes and adjustments have been made to deliver the amended plans and conditions before us this evening. The driveway has been moved further away from the common boundary. There will be landscaping. The stormwater concerns have also been addressed, and a traffic management plan is proposed that will address the concerns associated with delivery trucks. 4, in regards to the illumination of the sign, this will occur by in-ground lights that will shine directly on the wall. There will not be any lights outside of the property, so there will be absolutely no interference with the residents of Dalcott. Noise, specifically noise associated with the distillery process that reduces residential amenity, has been raised. On this, the proposed condition requires that noise does not exceed 5 dBA. Now, Madam Acting Mayor, to put this scientific measure into some perspective, 10 dBA, which is twice the amount permitted, is equivalent to breathing in terms of noise emission. That is, the permitted noise level is half of that. It will be almost, if not, imperceptible. The conditions also require a suitably qualified person to measure compliance with this. The loss of historic buildings was also raised as an objection. Now, well, these buildings aren't heritage listed, and having inspected them over the weekend, I'll just say that they're not in as good shape as I once knew them to be. Finally, increased traffic. Absolutely. And you know what? If that means more tourists visiting our city and spending their money here and increasing employment opportunities, surely that's a good thing. What's more, DSG has confirmed that they're happy with what's proposed and that this increase is manageable. Madam Acting Mayor, our city deserves the best, and this development is the best.
Thank you, Alderman Blomley. Alderman Kennedy.
Oh, thank you, Acting Mayor. I wasn't actually planning to speak to this. I think just about everything has been covered there by Alderman Blomley, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the people that made deputations tonight. That's very much appreciated, and we certainly have listened to all the feedback that we have had throughout this experience. So thank you again. It's really heartwarming for me to hear that some remedial conversations have taken place, and in good faith I hope they continue and we get the right outcome, because at the end of the day compromise is where we really want to get to with this. But this is a very comprehensive report from our council officers. It goes into a huge amount of detail. There are so many conditions there which should provide the comfort that most people need. So I seek council support on supporting the officer's recommendation.
Other speakers. Alderman Newton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I suppose if I go to the conclusion of the report prepared by our planning staff here, I mean, it sums it up pretty much. I mean, The proposal is considered to increase the agricultural production of the subject site, provide a market for local barley growers, provide an integrated paddock to glass experience for visitors to the Coal Valley, consistent with similar existing developments in the valley. The proposal is considered to align with the agricultural zone purpose to provide for the use or development of land for agricultural uses and development that supports the use of the land for agricultural use. Now, you know, that's the first thing there. And I mean, and to get to that point, obviously there's a lot of boxes that have got to be ticked. There's a lot of work that's got to be done. You see the amount of information that we have to go through and the compliance that is required to get to that point, have that sort of conclusion, is really what it all comes down to. If the planning scheme says that this complies, well, you know, as far as this says here, it complies. Now, other than that, you know, in any sort of situation like this, well, the other thing is that, you know, I mean, everyone that stood up here tonight, even the people that had concerns, they all said in principle they support this proposal. But I mean, what it really comes down to is that with anything new, there's a bit of fear of the unknown. And I mean, that's a legitimate concern for people to have. But I mean, the good thing is that as both Alderman Blomley and Kennedy have said, there's been consultation between all parties to try and resolve some of those differences, and it seems that most of those have been addressed. But at the end of the day, you know, I mean, different people have different interpretations and different positions on scale and those sort of things. And I mean, I think, you know, the developers have a right to basically put forward what they think is going to work best for them from a development perspective. And if that's the way they want to do it and it's permitted to be done like that, well, they should be allowed to do that. You know, the economic benefits to Clarence, not only for the developers but also for the staff, for the associated farm area, for the wider Clarence community and Tasmania in general, you know, a fantastic thing to see happen. And, you know, I mean, basically, and the other thing is too, the innovative way that the water and waste are being addressed in the development in relation to sustainability and the way that they're doing their operations. The fact that it's being done now, we know all those sorts of things have got to be addressed at a higher standard than what they might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. You know, means that I'm pretty confident that this thing will deal with the noise and the you know, those sort of issues that have been raised. But at the end of the day, I think this is a fantastic development for our city, and I encourage my colleagues to vote accordingly and support this development.
Thank you. Other speakers? Alderman James and then Alderman Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The question in relation to Clarence's planning scheme needs to be addressed because this is a discretionary proposal and hence we have to go through the process of assessing it against the acceptable solutions and the performance criteria. The simple fact of the matter is on page 15 there are a number of compliance within the zone and codes, and they are covered on page 15 and they have been basically identified as being exceptions to the planning scheme. So what we have here is a proposal which is $30 million. It's a huge proposal in the sense that we don't have that, we haven't had that investment in the city for many years, particularly in the Richmond corridor, and of course in relation to whatever other projects that have gone ahead over recent times. And I can assure you that when Crago was being considered, it was a very tasteful, I use that word, a very appropriate development because the owners at the time decided that it needed to have proper access off the main road and the tasting centre was established accordingly. With those other developments along Richmond Road, you have the Wicket Cheese and so on, you have all of those different wine growing and grape growing proposals, and they are blending in with the community within that particular area, within the amenity of the area. So now we have in front of us a large structure. It is a distillery, and that is the part that I really want to identify in this particular comments that I'm making. It is actually a factory which is going to produce, and quite rightfully so, I'm quite partial to a glass of whiskey, but at the same time, what is going to happen here, it is a large-scale production on a major tourist road, and the fact of the matter is that only a small portion of the land, 52 hectares, is going to be in crop and in the production of barley. And of course there's going to be requirements to obviously have other sources of barley from the area in order to meet production quotas and so on. So you have a large development with an agricultural part thereof usage, and the majority of it will be on basically be on a large car park. There will be a large building, restaurant. There will be, in fact, beyond that, large bond storage containers, and you'll have the actual distillery. And the distillery will, as we know and heard to this evening, can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that by the very nature, its capacity of 2,000 litres a day hasn't been met at that stage. And there are other provisions that may include that this particular project is of a need that may warrant additional conditions should that capacity be exceeded. The simple fact of the matter is that the agricultural use is perfect for barley. As we know, there was many years ago, there was barley production cropping in that particular area, along with everything else. But the simple fact of the matter is we have a large building, a very large building, which is out of keeping, in my opinion, with the amenity of the area, and it's been addressed, and there have been some issues raised here in relation to the agricultural zone. I have prepared a motion, a foreshadowed motion for refusal, and I've identified those key points. I know that particular motion won't get up, but it's there for those who wish to actually exercise their right to actually go ahead, and if they decide to take it to the next step, then there is a motion there which I have researched and basically felt that it does cover why this particular development should be, the distillery that is, should be in an industrial area, namely in the Cambridge Industrial Zone. And in summary, may I say that this, I'm not against development. I supported the Crago, I supported Wicked Cheese, I've supported over the last 30 years many industries in that particular area. But there comes a stage when we have some developments which exceed what I believe is appropriate for that particular area and is basically turning it into a factory and industrial operation. I will not be supporting this motions before the Chair.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I too would like to thank all those people who've shown up tonight to show their interest in this matter. I'd also like to thank the opportunity to meet with the developers and several of the neighbours over the weekend. There's no substitute for going out and seeing a place and hearing both sides, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to do that. I guess when we're talking about the scale and the precedence for something like this on Richmond Road, two developments immediately spring to mind, and that would be the Frogmore Creek development, which also has a very large car park very near the road, and the Coal River Farm, similarly. The development itself is further back from the road, but there's very little between the road. There's basically car parks. So I think there is a precedent for this sort of development in that area. Regarding the point about the agricultural zoning, I asked for clarification on this afternoon, and my understanding of this particularly discretionary clause is that you can have other things on an agricultural land as long as it's not preventing the land being returned to agricultural purposes at some later stage. So clearly buildings can be removed. I'm really heartened to see the introduction of crops where there's no farming at the moment, and we know the difficulty of making a living from farming in this area where you don't have any sort of value adding. So the fact that this all works together brings the land back to life, but also provides an experience for people to go in and see what's involved and actually understand the journey from barley to bottle. I also would like to congratulate the developers and the neighbours for the very generous and honest discussions that have been held. So often we come to this place and vote on matters where the developers have not spoken to the neighbours and are not prepared to compromise. And a little bit of compromise goes a long way. Sure, it may not be the ideal development for the neighbours, but by having those sorts of conversations, we've managed to perhaps address some of those concerns. Now, I noticed that there was some concern that all we have at the moment is the developer's word that these things will be addressed. So I wonder, is it appropriate through you, Deputy Mayor, to ask the General Manager how that might be addressed? Because what we have in front of us is the original proposal, and there have been amendments made to it since then in discussion with the neighbours that are not included in this. Is it possible for you to explain how that might be dealt with?
Thank you, Alderman Warren. I might defer to Mr Gibbs to answer that in a technical sense.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. There's a number of conditions that are proposed which reflect the discussions that have been had between the parties. I draw your attention to condition 2, which is an amended plans condition. That talks about relocating the driveway and a number of other things. Condition 11 talks about a traffic management plan, and that's about having speed limits on the site and prevents trucks from using their air brakes. And we've also got conditions around the stormwater issue to ensure that the stormwater is dealt with in the property and it's not causing a problem for neighbours.
Thank you. So I think that certainly addresses some of my concerns, to know that that is in writing, in black and white. So I'm pleased to be able to support this proposal.
Thank you. Other speakers. Alderman Edmonds.
Thank you. Look, I won't waste too much more of people's time, because basically everything I had in my head has been said at least twice probably around this room. But I think it is worth reiterating that so often when we deal with planning issues, and that's what we're here on, planning, where it's gotten ugly and it's come in here and spilled into this arena, I just think it's worth congratulating everyone who had us out for the site visits, and even tonight the deputations has been really good, and I think that's reflected in some of the give and take of how this has gone through, and I really congratulate everyone involved for the way they've engaged with each other. The report is comprehensive, and congratulations to Mr Gibbs in particular, and the recommendation itself is 4 pages, I think, long, 5. And there have been a lot of issues raised about the development, and they're basically all addressed between page 33 and 44 of the report. The issue that probably is outside of everything that's within our remit, I'm comfortable with. The issue around traffic, I think, is something that we can continue to take up with DSG, as we do on a lot of other issues. But everything that comes under Clarence City Council's umbrella as a planning authority, I think has been dealt with in a really first-class way. And just to reiterate that I really am so heartened by the way that there's been issues raised, they've been actually listened to and addressed and come to the report. And yeah, it might not be ticking everyone's boxes, but people are a lot happier than so many other things that come in front of us. So congratulations to everyone on that front.
Thank you. Other speakers. Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. May I say, Mayor, before COVID, I had a works conference. I organised a works conference here, and on our free day, where did I take people? I was pleased to say that I took people to Richmond, because it's a great place in Hobart, and I did tell them to spend. Now, there's a couple of things here, and don't think I just support this. There's a couple of issues that I had too, and I've got answers on those now. And one, I think a lot of people had, was noise and odour management, the outdoor lighting that's been addressed, and the noise from the distillery. Now, there are things that did worry me, but they've all been addressed. I've been out there, had a look at the site, I'm pleased to say, and look, I think this is marvellous. And I reiterate a lot of what Alderman Warren said. We're getting farming land, being used for what it was before. So I think this is a great development, and I certainly support it.
Thank you. Other speakers? Alderman Walker.
Thank you. I'm probably recapping some matters, so I'll try and keep that to a degree of brevity. Firstly, I think it's really important to acknowledge the value of special general meetings because it does give the time to deep dive. We often get representations before us, but the inability to sort of ask those further questions means that we don't always get to get another level of knowledge. It's set at 10 million, and with the rate of inflation, that's probably going to be about 3 townhouses before too long, so we might need to look at changing the threshold. Now, some of my formative years were spent along Acton Road, and where I was living, which was closer to the Lauderdale end, back in a time before Acton was a place, once you hit the turn off to Roaches Beach, the speed limit was 110 all the way through to what is now the Tasman Highway. And I guess I raise that in part because obviously that area has now changed over time, in the same way that if you look at Richmond Road, back then you could delight yourself at Farmer Armour, which was next door to the Cambridge Primary School, but then there was nothing until Richmond Village. And if we look at what's happening now, I guess water is the main transformative change. The soil, the productivity that's able to be gained from the soil with that might not be northwest coast level, but it's as good as can be because of the access to water. So this is an area that is going to be undergoing change going forward, and we need to be mindful about how that works and the reasons why perhaps this area more than others has been noted. It is the closeness to the CBD and the airport, and if you like, on a tourism perspective, that blessed by its proximity. We look at the recommendations, and I believe the recommendations offer reasonable conditions to what are reasonable concerns, and I think this has been largely facilitated because there are certainly differing views in the area about the project, but these disagreements don't appear to have been disagreeable, and the end result is much better for it. So, unfortunately, I was interstate, so unable to sort of do some site visits, but the report was fairly comprehensive and took a fair whack of time to go through. So I think things line up, and I think that people should have comfort and confidence to support the officer's recommendations, and that's what I will be doing.
Thank you. Alderman Mulder.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. We sit here as a planning authority, and it's our job to make a logical assessment against the planning criteria, which are part of a planning scheme, which is an instrument of the state government. I think we must be very, very careful that we're not seen, no matter how much desirable we think this may be, to become a motive or to become a cheer squad for either the developers or the opponents. It's a logical process and a logical assessment. I have a particular interest in the deputation made regarding traffic, but I also know that increasing traffic, increasing diversity, increasing usage is a matter of fact in an estate that is becoming more and more attractive to tourists, without whom we wouldn't have a state. They have become the lifeblood, as we found recently. And I have a particular interest in traffic. But the problem becomes driver behaviour, and the accidents are concerned. And the most that we can do is try to educate the drivers. And I noticed that one of the conditions of this development is to have a good hard look at the junction. By far the most accidents occur when there's a conflict between traffic heading in either different directions or crossing each other. And that's where this development, as many others along the road, have proven to be very successful. I don't know of too many accidents at the junctions to these types of establishments. There may be there, but I'm not aware of them. I'm also very impressed. As an aside, I noticed the amusing contribution regarding decibels. Now, decibels are to suggest that breathing is about the level of noise you're going to get is a very not noticeable thing, but decibels is a function of time and distance and of any interference behind me. Because I can assure you that my wife regularly reminds me at about 3 a.m. in the morning with a sharp poke in the ribs that breathing at less than 1 metre is extremely disturbing. So it's not a question of the breathing, of the decibels, it's the question of what are the decibels at the distance at which you are being impacted by them. So I also take a great heart in the fact that there has been lots of conciliation and lots of discussions between the developers and their neighbours and those that are interested. And I also look forward to seeing more adjustments on this as we go through. On balance, we must say that the requirements of the planning scheme have been met and that the conditions that have been imposed have addressed most of the concerns of both the planning scheme and the neighbours, and we look forward to some more fine-tuning of that thing. The one issue that's been put to us is that we can locate the storage facility to another place. I'm sorry, but that is completely outside the remit of this council. That has got something to do with the developer and it's got something to do with the planning scheme. And as desirable as that outcome might be and as practical as it might be for all sorts of purposes, it is completely beyond the remit of this council to make any moves in that direction. On balance, Madam Mayor, I must say that this is a sensible and appropriate development, but those value judgments aside, it meets the hard and harsh criteria of our planning scheme, and as such, I will support it.
Thank you. We lost Alderman von Berto.
I don't believe so.
He just disappeared off my screen for a moment. Would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. As the penultimate speaker, I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap-up. I'm sure that Alderman Blomley will do another part of the wrap-up. I, along with a number of aldermen, have been on a site visit, and I thank the proponents for that. I've also visited the equestrian centre next door, and I thank Amy for providing the information that she did to myself and a number of the aldermen in relation to her concerns. I note that the conditions of the permit meet many of the issues that the Griffiths have in relation to the development. I also note that the proponent made it very clear that they believe those conditions are very reasonable, very fair, and they are very committed to making sure those conditions are met, which is very heartening to hear. Some of the representations and the speakers tonight in relation to those representations are concerned about the scale and visibility of particularly the distillery and the storage. I can understand those concerns, particularly those people who are living in the Dulcott area and looking down onto that new facility and those buildings. One thing that I noted is that the architect who is involved in this particular development, Humulus, has been involved in the development of the distillery at Oatlands, the Callington Mill Distillery. And having seen that building where the distillery is actually housed, it's very high-end in terms of its appearance and its amenity. So I'm heartened in that respect as far as the architect is concerned. And I hope that when it's actually built, it will enhance the area, because looking at the plans, it does look large. However, it's the way that it's going to be built and sit within the area. I believe that the conclusion in the report covers the very large report, 45 pages, in saying that the proposal is considered to increase the agricultural production of the subject site, provide a market for local barley growers, provide an integrated paddock to glass experience for visitors to the Coal Valley, consistent with similar existing developments in the valley. The proposal is considered to align with the agricultural zone purpose, to provide for the use or development of land for agricultural uses and development that supports the use of the land for agricultural use. And for that reason, I support this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Blomley, right of reply.
Madam Acting Mayor, I'd like to thank colleagues for their contributions this evening. It's always a hard act to follow Alderman Bomberto, and as usual, she's done most of my job for me. But in closing, I would just like to reiterate that this process is exactly how the planning scheme and the associated process ought to work. A collaborative approach that delivers best possible outcomes for all. That does at times require compromise, and that is what has occurred in this instance. The conditions contained within this recommendation and within the motion before the Chair this evening ensure there are strong protections in place for all. As Ms Griffiths said, this is the best case scenario, and that the proponents had listened and acted on their concerns. Madam Acting Mayor, this is a superb development for our city that ticks all the right boxes, and as such I seek the support of colleagues.
Thank you. I put the motion that the development application for resource processing, development and food retail, distillery and cellar door at 819 Richmond Road be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Thank you all very much for your presence here tonight. That concludes the meeting.